And hello, everybody. Mike here. Glad you can join me. A lot of reports of the Atlantic Ocean being pulled away from the shores of Tampa, all of the state of Florida, and Bahamas. We have video here, different various places. If I can click on this link. And basically, the Atlantic Ocean's missing. Now, researchers have said that this was a theory that a hurricane, if it was strong enough, could actually do this. But in the 150 years that we've been studying hurricanes, we've never seen this phenomena. This is the first, and we are going to examine that today because a lot of people are concerned with this. Now, I have two very special guests. With me today is the amazing engineer, musician, I'm told, by Cindy, and he is actually a better modeler than I am in Blender. Welcome, Chris Monk. Glad you're here.
How's it going?
Also with me today is the intelligent, smiley, former ex-NASA, she worked at Lockheed Martin too, Cindy Holland. Glad you could join us today.
Thanks.
And so the goal is, first of all, to make this short and quick so people aren't looking at a 2-hour video. But the main thing is to explain to them why the Atlantic Ocean is pulling away from the shores of Florida. And is it something that we need to be concerned with, or is it something that's starting, or is it something they're testing for something later? And it's kind of weird. Now, Cindy, you first, because I thought you and I had talked the day of the eclipse. There was a lot of spraying of magnetic particulate, and that was bromine, Chris, was that correct?
Barium and strontium and aluminum sulfides. Yeah, so barium is the main culprit in that. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just pronouncing it wrong. So barium, and Cindy had felt something that was wrong, and my wife also felt the same. And Cindy and my wife talked, and they got this big old conspiracy thing going. But in the spirit, because the Holy Spirit will deal with us. He will lead us and guide us in all truth. Something was wrong. It was man-made. The next day, my wife said it rained like crazy. There was these strange orange-looking clouds up there nobody's ever seen. People were looking at that. I got calls from North Carolina that the tides that day were unnaturally high, higher than they've been in a long time, the day after the eclipse. Mm-hmm. Soon after the eclipse, Texas was hit by Harvey. And there are reports of weather tampering there. Now, Chris, you were talking about, we were talking about the F-18 Hornet that we're setting up flares and igniting. Can you tell us how that system kind of works?
Well, from what I understand, during Harvey, there was some reports, and I've seen some paperwork on it that was kind of circulating in the public domain of reports that I think they sent up 6 flares, and 3 or 4 were successful as far as igniting within the stratus, plane of the hurricane or whatever was the storm as it approached. So basically, it's like cloud seeding. They send up these flares, and they essentially burn off and explode inside the clouds and distribute particulates like barium and other magnetic materials within the cloud, and then it just adds ferocity and strength. And then obviously there are patents. I think I shared a few patents. We can probably bring them up a little bit later here, but there's at least, I don't know how many there are, but there's probably 3 main ones that I had sent you there that show how these systems work. There's ways to do it by even having airplanes fly into the eye of a hurricane and heat the central core of it using their jet engines to add the updraft and just intensify the storm. Then there's particulate magnetic steering of storms. You can use systems like H.A.R.P and local radar stations to heat just through induction and microwave energies to add strength to the storm by heating and convection and cooling. You can do whatever you want. These geoengineering modification systems have been around for a while, so that's what's going on for sure.
Now, I read the documents, I read the patents. You sent me 3. Obviously, we have the technology to do this. Would they be doing this, the seeding part, to help Harvey become stronger? Because also in the reports they say they can also stop natural weather that could be destructive. What's your opinion on what they were doing?
Well,
Harvey?
I think you need in the patents they do a little bit of both. There's actually one patent there too. it says, even the transportation of entities and other things within the eye of a storm, that's like you can't see into a storm, so we're better to fly a squadron, etc. Right in the eye of a giant hurricane and hide it from radar. There's all kinds of facets to that. I think it's very interesting. They always say the two-sided story. The first part is a militarization, and here's our weather control system, and oh, by the way, if we want to, we can do something good with it. But according to international law, back in the 60s and 70s, weather modification essentially was outlawed. So why are you still approving patents in 2005 for weather modification patents if it was outlawed in the 60s and 70s as a means of weather control, warfare, etc.? Right? If it's illegal, it should be illegal. So it should be illegal to pass a patent through the U.S. State Department, right? Patent Office. So in one hand you're calling it illegal, in the other hand you're passing patents. So that's a contradiction in legal terms. So then you're setting yourself up for a legal case to say, okay, well, the U.S. or any other country used weather modification as a weapon. Now we'll see in court for these perpetual, never-ending, money-generating court cases that go on for years and years and years and years, perpetual Supreme Court battles, right? There's the money, right? So it's all about money and control and buying futures on the oil market. If I want to profit off the oil market, well, I'll send a hurricane into Houston. I'll buy futures, a 10-to-1 bet on my hedge fund to say it's going to go down or the price is going to rise, and drive a hurricane into Houston. Right? It went up 11% in a day, right? So.
Okay, so
right.
Let's talk about now. Now, Cindy, you and I both realized during the eclipse, August 21st, 2017, something was not right. I mean, did you feel that day?
I did in advance. So I think we spoke probably a week prior to the eclipse. I remember right. And I just had an odd feeling. Like you said, the Holy Spirit guides us, and the Holy Spirit will kind of, I don't know, just there's a feeling you get. If you don't have the Holy Spirit, it's hard to describe that, but just an uneasy feeling. And so I was concerned of, what does this mean? Is this a good omen, a bad omen? But I never got a good feeling about the eclipse. And even the day of, everything was just it was an odd day. And since the eclipse, I have felt like things are escalating, weather-wise, fires, smoke. People in general are acting a little odd, just a heightened sense, unsecure sense.
So you were telling me you still had this feeling like a week after, though, like things are like, when you say escalating, they're still doing screwy things. We got pictures back from South Carolina, and I can't mention her name here, but they're noticing strange things with the sun, like a rainbow all day around the sun, and that's not normal, because to produce a rainbow, you need some type of thing that light can refract to produce those colors in that spectrum. Is that correct, Chris? Am I right? Something's got to be up there?
Oh, you have to have something for refraction and diffraction both. Yeah, it has to be. There's got to be something for a medium for that light to travel through and have a magnetic effect. Yeah.
So chemtrails comes to mind, because they've been spraying since the day of the eclipse, pretty much everywhere, continuously, as well as smoke from fires.
Right, and you brought that up. A lot of people are saying they're seeing a lot of extra spraying.
Yep.
Ever since the eclipse. So so what's going on? They're doing something, and are they preparing something? Now, Chris thinks it's political. I kind of had the thought that maybe they were tracking the eclipse, because we know that there was no solid object to block the path light of the sun. So they're finding out what things, and I thought maybe they screwed things up and trying to correct things, but maybe there's something more nefarious going on here than them just trying to correct what they broke, because we still all get that feeling, everybody does, that something's kind of off. I was talking to Archer Sage, he's in Florida, and he was telling me the path of this hurricane changed crazily. It was all over. He was supposed to get hit Sunday, and he said, Mike, there's nothing here. It's 5-mile-an-hour winds. A day later, the thing's a day late, all of a sudden he gets blasted. And he sent me pictures of flooded his neighbor's house, flooded the street. Thankfully, he still had power. But people in Florida are talking about this as the strangest hurricane that they've ever seen. And now we have video from many media outlets that the Atlantic Ocean itself has sucked its way from the shore. Now, this is not a HAARP weapon, and this is another type of thing they're doing using sound waves. And I'm going to have Chris here explain how they sucked the Atlantic Ocean away from the shores of the Bahamas and Florida, and what exactly is going on. So, Chris, break it down for us. Let us know your understanding of these patents and documents.
Well, in very basic terms, the mainstream media will tell you that the storm sucked the water away because there was an extreme low pressure in the eye of the storm, and basically the wind or the air updraft, sucked the water up into the storm and created this backdraw of the ocean. And, when you apply some basic, simple logic to that, and so you have to say, okay, well, if there was enough force in an updraft negative pressure zone to suck a quarter mile of water that's 6 feet deep, a quarter mile away from or more, even in some cases, away from the shore, then that negative back suction pressure would be enough literally to suck the air out of your lungs and the eyeballs out of your head as it moved that much water if you were anywhere near that, right? Right, so suction is suction, right? It would have come down through a funnel and across the plane of the ocean, and it would have had a boundary layer there, like a jet engine, essentially, but in reverse, right? So obviously that's
now,
complete nonsense.
Let me stop you a second, if you don't mind. Don't we have weapons that kind of do the same? Suck all the oxygen out of the atmosphere, like when people are hiding in caves and stuff. And
oh yeah, for sure. That's cave bear bunker busters and stuff like that too, right?
Yeah, so it doesn't take much. If what they claimed happened, that we'd see a more devastating effect than what we did. That's what you're saying, right?
Oh, absolutely. And if there was that much negative suction, by air, and it was sucking up that much water, then you would have had whales and sharks and octopus and everything else in people's living rooms and swimming in the streets of Florida, right? Because they would have been dumped on the other side. If they went up, they would have come down, right? We never seen any of that. So you have to just kind of think, okay, if there's a vacuum cleaner that huge, what's going into it, right? And if it took that much water, it took everything else.
And also that salt water that would come back down, it would have to be ocean salt water, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, what goes up must come down. It wouldn't have had time to really dilute and change, right? It still would have been raining, salt water, ocean, and seaweed everywhere, right? It never happened.
So people would have been dodging octopuses, dolphins, fiddler
sharks,
crabs.
Yeah, you name it. Yeah, if your living room is full of sea life and coral, then that's what happened. Yeah. So I mean, you have to just think about that for a little while, and you see how ridiculous their theory of that is. But in actual fact, what really happens during these immense storms is what drives them is electricity. There is some thermal conduction and convection that happens because you have a local hot-cold zone, and there is a pressure differential. But in the center of a hurricane or even a tornado, there's a charged vortex sheath that creates this tunnel effect. And so it's actually separated by an electromagnetic field. And even during, like Emily, which was, I can't remember what year that was. Emily was quite a while ago. But if my memory serves me correctly, I think they measured, roughly 8 to 10 kilovolts per meter squared, right, or cubed, right? So that's a volumetric measure of kilovolts per meter, right? And if you imagine how big this storm was, right, Irma was, 800 miles wide or 400 miles wide, right? And the volume of it, and multiply that by 10 kilovolts per meter on the external, and then the inverse internal is going to be equally as impressive, but it's a negative charge center, right? So that's what raised the ocean, is because the salt water is a saltwater dielectric, right? So you charge the water with a negative going up the center, it pulls everything from the shores towards the center cone of the charge vortex, and it's a negative electric pressure. It has nothing to do with wind. Right, the wind is a byproduct of the driving force of first the magnetism and the electricity drives the wind, and this is exactly the technology that they're using to steer these things if they desire, because they just plug into it with a microwave and or whatever, right, through H.A.A.R.P and different Los Alamos, those types of things, CERN.
Okay, so let me ask you. It says here that the method is disclosed for affecting the formation or direction of a low atmospheric weather system. Audio generators. Did they use audio generators, Chris?
This one was this one was interesting. You know, it was so big. Maybe they were employing more than one. I mean, you could apply different processes to do whatever you wanted. This storm was quite interesting, I thought, because there were reports of seismographs picking up the storm while it was still 400 or 500 miles offshore. So inland seismographs were picking up these vibrations and low frequency, like earthquake type of things. As the storm approached, it was pulsing, and there were the seismographs, which are actually designed to study and register earthquakes and or volcano eruptions, that type of stuff. Like that's actual vibrations in the ground. So this storm was vibrating somehow through the ocean into the ground and being registered onshore in advance of the storm. So that pretty much tells me that there was something strange going on as far as it having a scalar wave or sort of a sound wave that was actually penetrating through and being distributed and picked up by the land itself. So definitely.
So these sound waves, they negatively charge. We know salt water is a dielectric electrical conductor,
right?
Through a magnetic, and you can change salt water to magnetic field. It's kind of like how our natural tides work. Our moon is a dielectric negative magnetic light of some type, and as it passes by, it condenses the salt water molecules, which pull in and bring and make our tides.
Correct.
Yeah. And so when you run this massive power through the Atlantic Ocean like they did, and like Chris said, using sound and other things, and all sound is we have an electric magnetic field running through us right now. And when you make a sound, it's not based on particles. When you make a sound, you disrupt and you send a wave through that electric magnetic field that's already running, and our eardrums pick that up. And that's why a lot of people hear constant ringing, and what that constant ringing is we're just listening to this magnetic field going through us constantly, and kind of picture like dropping a pebble in a water. The water would be our electromagnetic wave running through Earth, and the pebble would represent a sound made, and that wave would carry that sound to us. Is this correct, Chris?
Yeah, that's basically how it all works, right? It's a disturbance in the field and interference patterns, and then we pick it up, and our brains convert it into, electromechanical sound and just process it. And it's like, Cindy was saying, and your wife too. I mean, when these things are coming, and even animals will pick up on it. Your cats get freaked out, your dog starts getting antsy, and you start getting antsy. You can feel it before it comes, because there is an electromechanical or electrical magnetic change in the environment. And as they ramp it up, you can feel it in your fingers will start to tingle, your hair will start to stand on end, you get edgy, you get nervous, that anxiety feeling in your gut because something's going down, right? And it is an electromechanical change. Yeah. Blood pressure will increase,
Because everything is electromagnetics.
Yep.
Everything, from the cells to what's above us, to how the sun and moon operate, to our projections of the sun and moon. I want to read for some of the listeners what these things are planned for. And I'm going to put these links in the description so you guys can read it. Okay, so it is a principal object of the invention to provide a process for affecting the formation of low atmospheric weather. It is another object of the invention to provide a process to alter the direction of weather systems which may produce hurricanes or tornadoes. We've seen that with Irma. People in Florida are talking about, because they told them it's going to hit you here, and then it doesn't hit. They told Archer Sage it's going to hit him on Sunday. Nothing happened on Sunday. It came a day late. This thing was being directed by something else besides natural weather patterns. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yep, absolutely, yeah.
And this is what people in Florida were talking about. It is further object of the invention to provide process to disrupt or enhance the formation of hurricanes and tornadoes in this device by the NOAA. And I might as well just say it's all NASA's fault. This device can produce tornadoes up to 200 miles an hour. This is what the patent's claiming. And we've all seen what 100-mile-an-hour wind can do to houses and trees. Think about the government having something in their hands that could produce 200-mile-an-hour winds.
Yeah.
And basically what they're saying is they can create them and they can take them away. Like the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. These guys are playing God in a way. And this is out in a biblical proportion. Think about it, folks. They sent a sound wave. Now, this wasn't HAARP, and I just want to make it clear. HAARP's a different thing. HAARP melts people in buildings, a couple hundred miles away, bouncing off our ionosphere. This thing had enough wave energy to disrupt our magnetic field so much that it pulled the shores off a whole state of Florida. It contracted the whole Atlantic Ocean. This is the kind of power we're talking about here. This is like God-like powers. Chris, explain how this how the density with salt and how you can take electromagnetism and affect salt water to contract, and explain our natural tides to people in the moon so they can kind of get an idea how they were able to produce this kind of like in a simple, easy to understand form.
Well, very simply, salt just increases the conductivity and resistance in the water, and then it has a certain ion charge. And as you put it, you can take a little tube of water and put it on in the bathtub in your house, right? Take a tube of water and put some salt in it, salt water, and take a magnet. And if you're careful, you can push the tube of water without touching it as it floats on water with the magnet. And really, that's all it is. It's just a magnetic field changing the direction and it having a magnetic influence on the water. And if you have enough amperage and enough magnetic field, you can do whatever you want with that, right? So they just create a charge above and let it do its thing, right? So, I mean, they're taking advantage of, they know where the natural ones are going to start, but as soon as the natural one starts, they can just keep adding power to it and do whatever they want after, nature does its thing, right? The first initiation, and then all of a sudden they just take it from there. So it's interesting. I think this one was actually, without being too controversial or putting my neck out there too far, but just I would suggest to people to look at the path, look how it slowed, look where it hung out the most and the longest, and how it was steered. I mean, essentially, the Virgin Islands there and the Caymans and all that in that area, and Cuba, completely devastated. Right? I think Haiti was down in that area as well. Again, roughly, if I look at the map, my geography might be a little off, but that string of islands in Cuba and all that was completely just decimated. Right? And Florida did take a bit of a hit, but it seems that they took a little lesser hit. Right? So it's kind of, I see it as being a two-faced kind of thing. You're wearing one mask and saying, "Oh well, we didn't do it because we were hurt. We were hurt too." Yeah, well, you guys didn't get hardly anything, but this whole strip was completely annihilated. That cuts off the United States from South America. And if you're going to be forming a European or a North American Union, and you want to, clean out the borderline so you can put in a big wall, and you need to connect Canada and Mexico, and Mexico was hit with an 8.2 earthquake at the same time that had flashes of light in the sky. Right? That was also reported within the last week or two. Right? So there's another electrical discharge from the ground up causing an earthquake of 8.2, the biggest one in Mexican history. Right? So now you've got Cuba's completely blown. Mexico is under a state of emergency. So let's send in the troops and take over martial law, and we're going to help you. Right? So now we're going to
already
exactly right.
Yeah.
So we're going to help you. So here's the big
that?
natural disaster, and we're going to be the heroes and help save you and bring in our foreign aid policies and security and UN troops and et cetera, But you
I'll
just
you
don't realize that you're actually under
so
attack.
I can rescue you, right?
So,
what did you say,
there.
Cindy?
Yeah.
What did you say, Cindy?
Yeah, I missed what you said there, Mike. Here, I think you're muted.
Oh. Yeah, I muted myself so I can hear you guys. I missed what Cindy said. What did you just say? Chris was talking?
It was also Texas. So Texas just had their hurricane, and they had a form of martial law because of the destruction. People displaced, obviously, and I believe the National Guard was in there doing whatever it is they were doing. But then you also had the fires, and apparently the fires aren't just on the west coast of the U.S., they're also in Canada, because we're seeing reports of tons of fires burning in Canada, tons of fires burning over here in Arizona. And so we're covered in smoke and dealing with earthquakes and weather anomalies and an eclipse. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff all packed up into, what, 2 weeks?
Absolutely, yeah. This is what I call the slow roll, right? In construction and that type of thing, it's the economic slow roll of these giant conglomerate construction companies that are basically the dark side of the government. It's that, what do they call it, the black government, or dark programs, black programs, or the deep state. So there's the word I'm looking for, deep state stuff. Last year, I think it was, we had in Canada a fire that essentially took out the entire city of Fort McMurray. It didn't actually, it burned some of the city, of course, but it burned all around the city of Fort McMurray, and that area is nothing but the biggest oil refineries in the country. And they, perhaps in North America too, as far as actual raw oil sands, square mile area of refineries. Suncor's there, Syncrude's there, Shell. I mean, all the big players are up there doing their thing, right? In Canada, CNRL, the whole 9 yards, they're all there. BP, I mean, you name it, right? They all got a piece of the pie. But that town, there were 70 some odd thousand, close to 80,000 people displaced during the fire. They were all kept out of their homes for upwards of 3 months, if not more. And you have to ask yourself, okay, so there's a fire. The fire went out. The fire passed in 3 or 4 days. Everything was settled down. The ones, why were they held out there for 3 months, right? 3 months they couldn't go back to that city, right? The fire was gone, right? It didn't last more than a week or whatever. And so I have to think to myself, well, that gives you enough time to put in a relatively secret underground pipeline to tie into the Keystone Kelly pipeline, the Keystone pipeline, right? That's coming down through to supply Houston. Right, so those are the types of, how do you use fires and natural disasters to manipulate and buy you the time you need to install another program? What's the underlying program? Right? If you could predict like something like we've had in Canada too, major floods and rainfalls and whatnot, if you know what's going to happen, you can buy futures on the wheat market and send in a storm to take out a couple 100,000 hectares of wheat, and you can profit immensely on the loss while you gain on the insurance, right? Mm-hmm. Who profited the most, during these hurricanes that you just had around Florida, right? Well, Trump had a $28 million mansion down there that was insured and completely destroyed. He got paid twice for it, probably, right? He claimed his insurance money, right? And so did Branson, right next door. I mean, these guys had all these resorts and stuff and big houses. Trump had his house on the market for almost a year, and he had to reduce the price to $16 million. But now that it's been destroyed, he can get the full 32, right? Doubled his money.
So we can affect the futures market. Our futures market, people, is how we get our groceries. Yeah. It's where the things are stored, and people bid on them for future delivery on the futures market. But if we wipe out Florida, and send some California, we can drive orange juice prices up, right?
Chemical prices, all the chemical plants in Florida, and the nuclear power production was shut down for a week. I mean, there goes a spike in your power prices, nationwide, right? If Florida is one of the primary power producers,
All right. So do we have anything to worry about? We're going to wrap this up. I didn't want to make it too super. I know some of our hangouts go like 8 hours, man, and everybody's taking sleep breaks. But do we have anything to worry about, or is this more a power play, or is this a testing, or what's NASA and our government doing, in your opinion?
Well, they're doing it for a reason. I mean, they know it's coming. They have to. It's a multifaceted thing. I mean, yeah, I do think there's some stuff to worry about, because eventually they're trying to install this one world government, new world order, transhuman, 4D reality, holographic, everybody's chipped environment, and that's the ultimate goal, is this sameness and oneness, and you must be a 3D printed carbon copy of your neighbor, and they control 100% of everything, right down to your thoughts if they can. That's their modus operandi. So, yeah, I think we got some stuff to worry about, right?
Yeah, I do. I agree. You and I were talking about the AR, VR,
Oh yeah.
They want to get the price so low. It's kind of like the microwave where everybody has one, and people will get lost in reality. Everything you see will be like you'll see your light bill. It'll be addictive, just like drugs are addictive, and you'll be able to be programmed through this. And we see it coming, especially Microsoft HoloLens technology. They're working with Jet Propulsion Labs now to get that implemented and get it in everybody's home. And I could just call you up, Chris, and just like, hey, Chris, anywhere I'm at, and put a picture of you up, and then we can, and that's where it's going. They want everybody brainwashed, and now go on, Chris.
Well, like you said, every light bulb will be Wi-Fi capable. No matter where you go, right down to the LED. Everyone will have a little Wi-Fi chip in it, and it'll be all connected. And with this barium, the thing that concerns me about the barium is that it's a man-made metallic type of salt, and it's actually programmable. I mean, this is nanotechnology stuff, right? So if it's so small that it can be absorbed into your skin, through your lungs, through the tears in your eyes, through the hair in your head, right? If you're being exposed to it, it's already in you, right? I mean, it's in everybody, right? And if it's programmable, and essentially it's a nanoparticulate that's programmable, and it's reactive to microwave signals, right? What more do you need? I mean, people are all worried about taking the chip in their hand. Well, I'm sorry, it's too late. You've got it. It's in you now. You don't even know you got it, right? So
through this, you can affect moods, behaviors.
Absolutely.
What can you affect with this?
Crowd control, like during the North Dakota pipeline incident there, and you saw the military vehicles with the big square speakers on them. That's a scalar wave speaker system. So you just direct it at the crowd, and you beam microwaves at them. You can cause headaches. You can make them go to sleep. You can cause heart attacks. You can cause strokes. You can do whatever you want if you have enough power, right? And crowd control systems with sound, and you can't even hear it, right? You can make voices in their head, make them hear things, right? And this is true. This is real technology, right? It's the same process. Right.
And we're seeing the same technology applied in Florida, testing. We saw Irma being directed in strange ways. Irma went from a Category 4 to a 3. It skipped 2 and became a tropical storm. People in Florida are now looking at their beaches, and there's no ocean there. Cindy, do you have anything to say before we go?
In the book of Revelation, when it says that during the Great Tribulation, God sends his wrath against those who destroy the earth. I don't know if you remember that verse. I can't think of it offhand. I read it 2 nights ago. But God's wrath is against those who destroy the earth. That means someone's destroying the earth, at least attempting to. So they are definitely doing something. We should be concerned. And stay prayed up, stay close to God, because it's just, it's going to get hairy. That's what the word tells us. It's going to get bad.
There's a scripture verse. It's going to get hairy.
I don't think
in the last days, it shall be hairy.
I think you made that up.
I'm sure it's in Mike 1:5 or something like that. Well, I appreciate you two greatly for taking your time and talking with me. And hey, folks, I'm not into pyramids, ley lines, stargazing, the Book of Enoch, Michael Jackson clones. I'm not into Kintu, Rahu, Kent, Barbie, Sonic the Hedgehog, or any of that other nonsense. And for me to run a video like this should tell you that, one, there is a real issue. This is not fake stuff. The NOAA is playing with our magnetic fields. They are playing with high-frequency sound waves. They can control our weather, and that's what we're seeing in Florida. It was this condensing of the salt water, much like our natural tides, that affected the whole Atlantic Ocean. Now, just think of what these people are capable of, and that's why we're here, because we're also concerned for you guys too. Any last words?
I just think for people that really want to dig into the details, if they're really scientifically minded, and look like you're going to put the links to the patents. There's also the electric universe. You can just Google the electric universe, hurricane and tornadoes, physics on that from electric, and and dig into that. And there's also Dane Whittington Geoengineering, I think .org, and he's got a whole slew of information there too. So you got to dig into it, use your own discernment, and say that this is reality. This is what's actually scientifically possible, and actually happening. The reptilian alien agenda thing. Well, that's just a distraction, right? They want you to buy their books and their movies and all that fantastic stuff, right? But this is real. So in every story, there's a bit of truth and there's a bit of fiction, and you just got to find that line. That's what we're here for, right? And stick together, seek the truth, right?
Glory to God. Oh,
Yep.
Thank you, Chris.
Yep.
Cindy, any last thoughts?
Just, you know what? I agree with Chris.
I know it's screwed up. I know.
I want to see us all seeking truth and not trying to separate. I want us to stay together. We're truthers, and people need to know the truth. And so we need to be a team and stay focused on that.
Amen. Cindy, that was awesome. Yes, doesn't matter if you believe in the azimuthal equidistance of Gleason or the Pac-Man model, much like Chris and I do. That doesn't matter. Our government's screwing with stuff. Things are happening, and we need to stick together and not bicker and fight amongst each other. Yes, there'll be differences, but we can reconcile those and know that we do have a common problem or a common enemy. Thank you two, for joining. This is Mike. Out with Chris. Bye, Chris. And Cindy Holland. Thank you guys so much.
All right,
Mike,
Mike.
take care.
Thank you. Take care.